If
you
all
were to
you're
go
doing,
back in time, what would you do differently?
I would have, I would have been okay making a lot less money. The other thing that I realized I did a lot of was mislabeling to myself. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people are like, oh, I grind, right? Because they give you a highlight reel. So if you're working 12-hour days and you're like, oh, I was grinding, right? It's common. What a journey, eh? And how'd you get back to Canada?
Um,
Back
s-
to the great north, back to your hometown?
yeah, man. Just ultimately, I'm working on my visa to be down in the States. I am a big believer that the economy down there is just fantastic and it's great for opportunity for making money and getting experience. But um, I think I think the time it's taken to get my immigrations in order has been a blessing because,
In disguise, yeah.
yeah, just like I was talking about, just like becoming close with family. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so against it. I was
Mm.
so against it when it first came up. I was like completely
Because it
anti, but
wasn't what you wanted.
no, I thought it was going to be the end of the world.
Dude, I had so many moments
Yeah.
like that too. When I came back and I had like the whole visa fiasco, I came home and I was like, I was disgruntled for like 4 months, bro. I was like, what am I doing? Like 4 months, because my identity was so tied to Vivint,
Hmm.
and so when I left, I broke that association of my identity, my success, who I was to Vivint,
Yeah.
and had to build it up again from scratch. Now it's like now I don't care. Now I could leave whichever company and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So like it kind of gave me that power that I'd lost because I was so dependent on this company to give me success that now I'm like, okay, if I can do it on my own, then it wasn't the company all along, it was me, and that's what it was. It was me all along. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but now it's more about building sustainably and not grinding myself to the bone. So same thing, lessons with delegation. It's like I'd rather pay people around me more and make sure work's delegated. So I work, but it's more like decision making and not like actual grind or labor work.
I think there's like having done all the grinding and then slowly like bring in more and more delegation.
Yeah.
I think it's like there's a relationship you have with yourself, and it's like the more you learn, I'm like, dang, okay, I'm learning that the creative power of having more free time, having
Yeah,
more
it's way more
mental,
important.
yeah,
Way more important. Like there's certain decisions I can make that will just move us like twice as far. This is where I talk about being efficient with high output, not just more time, right?
yeah,
So now it's like I can make a couple decisions that make a big difference in the business as opposed to like 100 things and like getting nowhere, right? It's
hmm
just that perspective is really important to pick up on. So
creating space,
creating
yeah,
space.
yeah,
Yeah, the realizations that they come when you create space. One of the things that I also went away from, and maybe you did too, was like this warrior persona that we created.
hmm
It was so important, I think, when I was younger because it was like the way I channeled all the energy to like focus and work hard and build something for myself, at least some sort of freedom. Now that I've done that, I was like, I like sacrificed a lot, but I don't think that's how life is meant to be lived of
hmm
sacrifice. Because like you'll spend all this time sacrificing to get to a desired outcome, then you look back and be like, was it worth giving up that time?
hmm
Right? Was that trade off worth it? And I think the answer is no. Right? So if
If you
all
were to
you're
go
doing,
back in time, what would you do differently?
I would have, I would have been okay making a lot less money.
Really?
Yeah, because I wish I would. Well, I mean, like, it's hard to say because I've already done it now. But I would have rather have made 60K and focused on building an organization. Because a business is like a machine that makes money, right? A business is like a machine that gets you to where you want to get to. So I would have focused more time and invested more of the money I made back into this machine, which I already did a pretty good job of that, but I think I could have done it better.
Hmm.
Um, Instead of just hoarding money and trying to buy real estate and this and that, I would have rather just built up the machine bigger.
But you don't look back on that on the experience of having done it the wrong way. Like you recognize like having done it the wrong way
Allows
created
me
the
to, yeah,
perspective.
yeah, yeah,
Because
potentially. But I think if I had stopped and understood things, I wouldn't need to have gone through it. And that's the wisdom that's hard to pick up on. Is like, because we can't play it any other way. So it's not like we have a choice of like, maybe if I had understood that, maybe I would have got 10 times further. But I can't play that version out. So how could I say that's not a potential solution, right?
so
Do you get what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
I've already lived this life path. So now I can say, oh yeah, this life path happened and got me here. But I
Hmm.
can't live the one that I didn't experience that may have gotten me 10 times further because I had done it the way I understood. Does that make sense?
It does. So I think about it. I think about like the purpose of us talking about this too is that someone would be able to internalize that. And I think like, because here's the thing. So I'm assuming that you sharing the story, one, you're telling your story, you're sharing your experiences, but two, say somebody's listening to this and they're in a situation, whatever, they're trying to get perspective. Um, the I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how would you? Because there's two sides of this where you're either telling someone what to do because you're like, I know better than you and this is what you should do,
Right.
and then there's another part of it where it is like, if you don't just fully commit to the process or go through the pain, you're not going to have the perspective, because you see like trust fund babies, right?
Yeah.
Where I mean, you might be envious of them until you realize that they didn't learn the soft skills of having
Right.
to go out into the world. Whereas like, so I think you understand my
For sure.
question.
Yeah.
Versus having all that
I
experience.
wouldn't give anyone any directions.
You wouldn't.
No, nothing.
So even
Not
though
even
you
not
know
even
you.
work hard. Not even nothing. I'd let them figure it out, because again, I can only give what I've learned. I cannot give you something I have not. Like, I can only give you what I know has got me to my point. But by giving you that, am I stopping you from getting further in whatever it is that you want? And again, it's also with the filter of what does someone want. If someone's like, I
Because
want
it's
to have like,
subjective.
yeah, so it's so, I think that is the beauty of life, is that people just have to go through it, and you can only live it in one direction. So if I was like, if someone came to me and said, hey, I want to be successful, what do I do? I'm like, well, I can get you to my point, but maybe the advice I give you to get to my point holds you back from getting 10 times further along. And that's why I don't like to do that, because it's, am I helping or am I actually hurting them without knowing?
Right.
Right? Because like, imagine you go to your parents and your parents say, do X, Y, Z, and you listen to them, go to school, get a job, right? That's like the common advice. If you follow their advice, you would actually not be that far along. As you got older, you'd be like, who did I listen to? I listened to society, I listened to my parents. But I didn't listen to my own gut or my own intuition that said, hey, pursue YouTube or whatever, right? Because those are the questions that we cannot play out, right? Mr. Beast, I'm sure he was told to go to school, get a job, right? Everyone's given that societal advice.
Yeah.
But he went to YouTube, which no one else was doing, and look at where he's gone. But no one's told to like figure it out for themselves. That's like the one advice that doesn't get told, right?
It's interesting because so a lot of you're hearing more and more like, so on some podcasts I listen to, my favorite podcast is My First Million, MFM.
Yeah.
And they bring a lot of successful entrepreneurs on there.
Yeah.
And so many of these successful people now, they're raising their kids in very unconventional ways. Plug in
That's
the
the name
name.
of the podcast. Yeah.
What they're doing is like, there's billionaires who are actually creating their own schools specifically for their kids.
Right.
So they're like they're hiring like teachers. And so there's this one where they send these kids out onto a farmland, and the kids and the teacher's there, but the teacher gives zero direction. They just put the kids
That's way better,
into the
yeah.
outdoors and wait until the kids come up and say, what's this?
Yeah.
Then the teacher answers.
Right.
And they let the kids carry through their line of thinking with no guidance or control over their structure of understanding something.
Right.
And so just let the layers of their curiosity compound into creating concepts and understanding and learning. And it was
Right.
interesting because he was saying like, you've got one kid who comes home from school, right, from public school, private school, and you get this one other kid who comes back from this other unconventional. The one kid who was at school is exhausted,
Yeah.
burned out, because
He's
he
being
was
told what to do, or
stopped in all his creative endeavors. He was just restricted in his mind, while the other kid is just full of energy, because
Right.
his like, I don't know, call it neural pathways. His mind is just free flowing with
Right.
like just following what excites him and
Right.
gives him energy.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to like unlearn that,
Dude, it's
in
so
a way.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
that's exactly like harping on the point that I was trying to make. It's like,
Yeah.
so many people follow a path, and that student you're talking about, how like this one person's exhausted, because just think about it. If you're being told to think a certain way all the time, that you have to mentally force yourself to do that instead of allowing yourself, right? And that's the difference, is surrendering. Yeah, no, surrender is like a big thing, where like anytime I feel like I'm hitting roadblocks, I'm like, why am I forcing myself?
Yeah.
Right? Because I read a lot of books when I was younger, and over time I realized like I didn't actually want to read. I was forcing myself to read because it was going to get me here. But like, how much did I get trapped by that mentality? So now it's like if I feel like reading, I read. If I feel like doing something, I do it. But if I don't feel like it, I just don't do it. I surrender. Say whatever. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully some wisdom or some realization comes out of that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I realized I did a lot of was mislabeling to myself. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I grind, right? Because they give you a highlight reel. So if you're working 12-hour days, like when you're building your Web3 and your NFT project, you're probably working 12-hour days, and you're like, oh, I was grinding, right? It's common, but it's like, well, it was something you wanted to do, so it couldn't have been a grind. For
Right.
you at that point in time, the grind would have been doing nothing. That would have been harder. It's more work to do nothing than to actually do the work, which is why you chose to do the work over and over. So it's just like some weird mislabeling thing that people have instead of just allowing themselves to do. I wake up, if I'm obsessed about work, I will work. I don't judge myself for it. I don't hold myself against some sort of rubric. It's like I wake up and I cannot not work. So then I just let myself work. There's no secret here.
It just takes me back to like the days of knocking doors where I would pull up into a neighborhood. I'd be ready to knock on doors, and it was like I would feel so exhausted just sitting
Thinking
in my
about
car
it, yeah.
procrastinating
Yeah.
because I was doing something that just it didn't feel natural to me anymore. I didn't know why I was doing it.
You were losing the love for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it was strange. I mean, going down to the States, it was very interesting because
it's weird because at that point it was almost like working was just so painful. Like just getting yourself to do the work that like you probably at that point should have stopped, but you were so like trying to prove your place that you're like, I gotta do it. I just forced myself. Right? We all did a little bit of that.
It's interesting to talk about it a little bit too. So
see, I think the people that get really far along, they don't ever feel that. They don't let themselves feel that for too long.
Yep.
They're like I'm sure, I don't know, I can't speak for all those guys, but I'm sure like at some point if they don't feel like doing that anymore, they just stop. They don't torture themselves, right? You get the short life, 75 years if you're lucky. Why would you spend any bit of it torturing yourself?